Welcome back to the Hot Diggity Dog Read Your Dog at Home series. And Dory, I don't know if she's going to keep awake for this, but I hope my friends at home will. And this particular two chapters, 11 and 12, are dedicated to my friends in Maine, Tabor, Bowden, and Lily and Violet, who listened to the book when it was still in its embryonic stage. So hop on board. Chapter 11. More than anything, Humboldt wanted to sleep for 100 years, but he mustn't. He felt like he was climbing up a dark well. His body had gone limp. His eyes stung. He blinked them quickly, trying to clear the noxious powder. He felt the lure of sweet slumber. He had to use his paws to keep his eyelids open. Stay awake, he muttered. He felt her turn. It was bumpy. Luckily, he wasn't prone to motion sickness. Now it felt like she was going straight. Still bumpy, though, but straight it seemed. Was it a cobblestone street? Another turn. Humboldt wasn't sure if it was left or right. Hard to tell. Count the turns. He must track the turns. 3 so far, he calculated. Keep awake, whatever you do. Don't fall asleep. Everything depends on this, he told himself. He pressed his mouth to the lining of the sack and took in big gulps of air, trying to dispel the slow tiredness that lay hold of him. She seemed to be going straight for a bit. He heard people's voices, then a bus taking off. Was he near a bus stop? Where was the bus stop near Mrs. Gimmage's? Suddenly, he felt himself tossed around like a salad crouton. She shifted the sack higher up on her back. Think of something to keep awake, Humboldt told himself. All he could think of was Mrs. Gimmage's runny lemon pudding. He pictured himself standing in a huge bowl of cool yellow pudding. That seemed to help. Her footsteps got shorter. She seemed to be climbing up a hill. The noise of traffic grew fainter. It became very quiet. There was only the clopping of her feet on cobblestone. There was a funny smell, like old beer, like Itzhak's Newcastle brown bottles. Hops? Was it a brewery? Knowing this could be extremely helpful, though in what way Humboldt couldn't yet know. Suddenly she stopped. He felt himself dropped on the concrete. He heard jingling, the clinking of keys. A lot of keys. Chapter 12. Between an empty warehouse and a bankrupt hardware store stood a 3-story house, a perfectly ordinary house except for 2 things. The heavy canvas blinds were drawn tight like the eyelids of some long deceased person, and on the roof was a peculiar weather vane. It was a horse with a cloaked rider carrying the moon in one hand and a bucket of kittens in the other. Apart from these curiosities, the house was like many other London houses built in the Victorian era, red brick with square windows, a little garden much neglected, and an iron grille gate that was difficult to close. Humboldt didn't have a chance to take this all in. The view from inside the sack was not exactly panoramic. He heard a gate creak open and then the rattle of a doorknob. Once inside, the Babayaga let Humboldt out of the sack. He staggered and took a deep breath. The house smelled of cat. The Babayaga led him up a long banistered staircase which was unsteady. The treads were peeling off the steps. After a long climb, they emerged into a dark living room with high ceilings and cool stone floors. Everywhere Humboldt looked, there were cats. Sleek black cats with emerald eyes were lined up against the walls, curled up on tables and chairs, stretched across the mantelpiece, and perched on windowsills. As the Baba Yaga moved to the center of the room, the cats' heads all turned in one fluid movement, as if they were invisibly attached to one another. Humboldt was not fond of cats. He mistrusted them, Against one cat, he could have stood his ground, but here he was clearly outnumbered. The Baba Yaga took Humboldt to a small, airless room with a sloping ceiling. The flesh-colored walls had bare patches where the plaster was missing. On the floor in the corner was a mattress with straw poking out, hardly the accommodation he had become accustomed to. "What am I to do here?" inquired Humboldt. "Keep me company, troll. I hate to dine alone, and I need someone to practice my spells with." The Baba Yaga didn't look well, with her rough skin the color of putty, and her eyes, which bulged out like pale green grapes. Besides sporting a quantity of moles which dotted her skin, she was curiously lumpy and all in the wrong places. "Well, troll, I'm afraid I must leave you now." She leaned up close to him. He could smell her breath, which reminded him of empty sardine tins. "Make yourself at home." With that, she took out a handful of keys and scuttled out the door, laughing under her breath. He heard the door shut and the scraping of the key in the lock. This was the first night he'd ever spent alone, except the night he had left the river bank and landed in the hedge. He wondered about Mrs. Gimmich and Itzhak, and how they would ever manage without him. He imagined them in Mrs. Gimmich's cornmeal yellow kitchen, consoling themselves with tea and whiskey. From far away a train whistle shattered the sullen darkness. At last Humboldt fell into a chaotic sleep. He dreamt of a cold hand grabbing him by the neck and plunging him into the swift darkness of the sack. The next morning he sat bolt upright in bed, his first thought, "When will she eat me?" Thanks for listening, and we'll see you for the next chapter, chapter 13, to find out what happens to our friend Humboldt, and hopefully he'll still be here. What do you think, Humboldt? Hop on board. Cheerio.